Hi again. In The Rise of Adventism, Jonathan Butler is taking up Adventism and the American Experience, Part 2. Years after the passing of October 22nd, 1844, Hiram Edson recalled pathetically the great disappointment. Quote, "Our fondest hopes and expectations were blasted, and such a spirit of weeping came over us as I never experienced before. It seemed that the loss of all earthly friends could have been no comparison. We wept and wept till the day dawned." Unquote. Some Adventists looked upon the Millerite experience as a complete fiasco and were hastily winnowed out of the movement. Others seemed only fortified in their belief as a result of this second disappointment. There had been a prior disappointment in 1843. The Millerite revival had been one of such deep spiritual significance for many Adventists that to deny God's hand in it seemed to them almost a denial of God's existence. Insulating themselves from the hostile world around them, these Adventists drew upon the internal resources of their community to grope for new explanations. The Sabbath-keeping Adventists would be the largest and most significant outgrowth of Millerism, though they appeared as a vociferous offshoot of the Adventist conference at Albany in 1845. Most Adventist Christians at the conference reaffirmed their belief in an imminent second coming, but admitted a miscalculation in their prophetic reckoning. Sabbath-keeping Adventists retained the Millerite chronology, but infused the October 22nd date with new meaning. It was Hiram Edson, on the morning after, who saw a new vision of the atypical sanctuary from his field of unshucked corn. The cleansing of the sanctuary was not cataclysmic destruction on this earth, as Millerites had predicted, but a new phase of Christ's ministry in heaven that placed the earth under judgment. Soon further light broke forth on the Sabbath through the Seventh Day Adventists, urging true believers toward a rigorous Seventh-day Sabbatarianism during this grave period of judgment. The Adventist squabbles remained internecine for about a decade. Fundamental disagreement over the state of the dead, the existence of hell, the Sabbath, the ordinance of foot washing, the atonement, the nature of the millennium and judgment, embroiled Adventists in a crucible of conflict. Limiting their debate to the most post-Millerite community, Adventists adopted an esoteric language of prophetic typology that utilized a Millerite biblical rationalism. Sabbath-keeping Adventists confined their missionary outreach to other Adventists, for in their sanctuary doctrine, the door of salvation was shut to those who had not passed through the 1844 experience. With this shut-door view as a tenet of faith until around 1851, Sabbath-keeping Adventists expected to fulfill the worldwide gospel commission by remaining in America and proselytizing there, representatives of the many nations. America formed the outer boundary of their concern, as the shortness of apocalyptic time allowed no wider evangelistic horizons. Further, America, as God's chosen nation, blessed by a second Great Awakening, had produced the tiny Adventist remnant that alone qualified for salvation in the contemporary world. In the late 1850s, the Sabbath-keeping Adventists followed the westerly migration to better homesteads in southern Michigan, and what they found to be evangelistically greener pastures than the burned-over district of western New York. The shift from Millerism to Sabbath-keeping Adventism involved a change in attitude toward the American Republic. In the debate of 1860, whether legally to incorporate Sabbath-keeping Adventists, the issue of church-state relations surfaced vis-a-vis the Millerite position. The practical necessity for the debate was that James White, among the triumvirate that founded Sabbath-keeping Adventism, was then owner of the Review and Herald publishing house, and had suggested corporate ownership of it and the numerous church buildings throughout the Adventist community. Since incorporation was obtained through the state, and only after the formal organization of a denomination, many Adventists believed such a move would return them to Babylon, for they would become just another church in union with the state. Here White identified such an utterly apolitical viewpoint as part of the Millerite mentality and sought to disassociate Sabbath-keeping Adventists from it. White, who dominated the discussion despite his best intentions, confronted fellow believers at the Battle Creek, Michigan conference with the pragmatic problems of building ownership, property insurance, and a name for the denomination. Ownership of the publishing house was in White's name, and if he should die, he warned, the property legally would pass to his children and would be unobtainable by the denomination until the youngest heir reached maturity. The meeting house in which they were then debating, he remarked, was owned by S.T. Belden, and at his death might be turned into a vinegar establishment. That's a direct quote from White. To incorporate would not violate the integrity of the denomination in any way, but only would solve pragmatic financial problems. The group, after a weekend of debate, compromised between the sectarian ex-Millerite position and the suggestion of full incorporation by White. They set up an association that would satisfy the legal requirements for incorporation and would be open to any member of the denomination that wished to join upon paying a nominal fee. This way, in their view, the church itself as the body of Christ would not be synonymous with a legal corporation or the state. Beyond this hurdle, which marked the move away from Millerism, they then settled upon the name Seventh Day Adventist. And by May 1863, this general conference was organized with 125 churches and about 3,500 members. The Seventh-day Adventist dream of America was made explicit in the interpretation of Revelation 13, verses 11 to 18, or the prophecy of the two-horned beast with horns like a lamb, but speaking as a dragon. The text read in their King James Version as follows, quote, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by the sword, and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand, or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he had that mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of the name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. While evangelical Protestants at this time typically saw the first beast of verses 1 to 10 as Catholicism, it was Seventh-day Adventists who took the exclusive position that the two-horned image of that beast symbolized Protestant America. According to Adventists, nations were mentioned in biblical prophecy if the identity of God's people commingled in some way with the national identity, as in the relation of the ancient Hebrews to Babylon. Thus, a symbiotic relationship between America and the Seventh-day Adventists was suggested by the Adventist interpretation of Revelation 13. J.N. Andrews, a young and prominent leader in the early group, introduced this view in an article entitled Thoughts on Revelation 13 and 14, May 1851. The two horns of the beast, according to Andrews and subsequent Adventist interpreters, represented the separation of church and state in America. More specifically, the two horns signified Protestantism and republicanism. In other words, this political cartoon in the book of Revelation depicted the American experiment in civil and religious freedom. More to come in Butler's examination of the early Adventist movement next time. I'll put in a link to Ray Frann's discussion of groupthink and loyalty to organization trumping the truth. In that discussion, we also include the meditations of Jerry Gladson, the very prominent Seventh-day Adventist teacher who also left his movement around the same time that Ray Franz left Jehovah's Witnesses. See you soon.